When we talk about computers, our minds often drift toward the matrix, cascading green code, and unfathomable complexity. But the reality is far more grounded and, frankly, far more beautiful. At the heart of every digital miracle lies a component called the transistor. Many textbooks will bury you in physics equations to explain it, but we are going to reframe it. Imagine a transistor not as a complex piece of quantum engineering, but as a simple electronic switch. That's it. It has no moving parts, no gears, and no soul. Yet, this one component is the DNA of the modern world. The central question we must answer is this: how can a simple on-off switch enable a machine to calculate the trajectory of a rocket, render a 3D world, or understand the nuance of human language? We are embarking on a conceptual journey today, moving from the gritty reality of copper and silicon into the high-altitude clouds of abstraction. Before we dive into the guts of the machine, I want to share a personal note. You might notice that my voice has a certain rhythmic, synthesized quality. Because of my specific language background and the desire to communicate as clearly as possible with a global audience, I've chosen to use text-to-speech technology. I think there's a poetic irony in that, don't you? Using the very logic we are about to study to explain itself. This choice is about accessibility and a bit of humor, proof that even if English isn't my first language, the language of logic is universal. I want this to be an approachable space where no question is too small. We are here to learn together, and if a computer-generated voice is what it takes to bridge the gap, then we've already started our journey into the power of digital abstraction. So, what does a transistor actually do? If you look at one under a microscope, you'll see a three-terminal device. Think of it like a T-junction in a water pipe. You have the collector, the emitter, and the base. In this analogy, electricity wants to flow from the collector to the emitter, but there's a metaphorical gate blocking the path. The base is that gate. If we don't apply any pressure, current, to the base, the gate stays shut. The electricity sits there, waiting. But the moment we apply a tiny minuscule amount of current to the base, the gate swings wide. Now the main flow can surge through. This is the electrically controlled switch. Unlike the light switch on your wall that requires a human finger to flip it, a transistor can be flipped by another electrical signal. This means machines can flip their own switches. This is the spark of life for the computer. Now let's take that switch and do something useful with it. Imagine a simple circuit with a battery, a transistor, and an LED light. If we send a signal to the transistor's base, we'll call this a 1. The transistor turns on, and the LED lights up, an output of 1. If we stop the signal, a 0. The light goes out, a 0. This is a simple gate. The output directly mirrors the input. It seems trivial, almost boring. But this is the moment where physics turns into philosophy. We have mapped a physical state, the presence or absence of electrons, to a logical state, true or false. Once you can represent true and false, you can represent anything. But what if we want to be stubborn? What if we want the light to be on when the signal is OFF? By simply rearranging where we place the LED in the circuit, placing it in a bypass lane, we can change the behavior entirely. When the transistor is OFF, the electricity is forced to go through the LED to complete the circuit. But when we turn the transistor on, it offers a path of much lower resistance, effectively stealing all the electricity away from the light. Suddenly, an input of 1 produces an output of 0, and an input of 0 produces an output of 1. This is the NOT gate. It is the first logic gate. It proves that the meaning of a circuit isn't just in the components, but in the structural arrangement. We are no longer just moving electricity. We are manipulating information. If we want to get smarter, we need more than one switch. Imagine 2 transistors placed in series, like 2 doors in a single hallway. If you want to get to the end of the hall, the output, both doors must be open. If only the first door is open, you're stuck. If only the second door is open, you're still stuck. Only when input A and input B are active does the current flow. This is the AND gate. It represents the first major step away from individual components and toward logical blocks. We can stop thinking about collectors and emitters and start thinking about conditions. Now let's change the architecture. Instead of doors in a single hallway, imagine 2 separate hallways that both lead to the same room. If you open door A, you get in. If you open door B, you get in. If you open both, you definitely get in. This is the OR gate created by placing transistors in parallel. It's a more inclusive kind of logic. By changing the physical structure of how we wire these switches, we have created a completely different logical rule. Are you starting to see the pattern? The intelligence of the computer is actually just the geometry of the wiring. As you can imagine, drawing thousands of little transistors would get exhausting very quickly. This is where engineers use abstraction. We stop drawing the three terminals and the resistors and instead use standardized symbols, D-shaped icons for AND gates, curved triangles for OR gates. The magic part is that because the output of a gate is just an electrical signal, it can serve as the input for the next gate. We can chain them together like Lego bricks. We are building a tower of complexity, but each individual brick remains perfectly simple. Let's try something more complex. What if we want a circuit that only turns on if one input is active, but not both? This is the exclusive OR or XOR gate. To build this, we have to combine several AND OR and NOT gates. It's a bit of a maze, but when you zoom out, you realize you've created a difference detector. This gate is the secret sauce of computation. Why? Because the XOR gate allows us to understand why abstraction matters. It is much easier for a human brain to think, this gate tells me if the inputs are different, than to track the state of 6 individual transistors. We are hiding the complexity to make progress. Now we transition from logic to math. Humans use base 10, 0 through 9, likely because we have 10 fingers. Computers use base 2, 0 and 1, because transistors are either on or off. When you add 1 plus 1 in binary, the answer is 10, which represents 2. But a single bit can only hold a 0 or a 1. This creates an overflow. You have a sum of 0, and you carry the 1 to the next column. To do math, a circuit needs to be able to output two things, the result of the current column and the carry for the next one. This is the blueprint for a calculator. Before we build that calculator, it's worth asking, how do you learn to think this way? The jump from a switch to a logic gate isn't always intuitive. This is where a platform like Brilliant comes in. Brilliant doesn't just ask you to memorize formulas. It forces you to solve puzzles. It's an interactive way to build that coding mindset. Whether you're looking at neural networks or basic logic, their short, engaging lessons break down the intimidation factor. If you've ever felt like technology was a closed book, Brilliant is the key that opens it. It's about learning the why, not just the how. Back to our math problem. We need a circuit that adds 2 bits. If we look at the truth table for addition, 0 plus 0 equals 0 plus 1 equals 1, 1 plus 0 equals 1, 1 plus 1 equals 0. With a carry of 1, look closely at the sum column. 0, 1, 1, 0. That's exactly the behavior of our XOR gate. Now look at the carry column, 0, 0, 1. That's exactly the behavior of our AND gate. By hooking an XOR and an AND gate to the same 2 inputs, we've created a half adder. It can add 2 numbers. It's a triumph of engineering. But it has a fatal flaw. It can handle a carry-in from a previous column. It's like a person who can add units but forgets the tens. To solve the scalability problem, we need the full adder. This circuit is essentially 2 half adders smashed together with an extra OR gate. It takes 3 inputs, input A, input B, and the carry-in from the previous operation. Now, the circuit is complete. It can take a carry, do the math, and pass a new carry to the next stage. It's a self-contained unit of arithmetic logic. We have moved from a switch to a gate to a mathematical component. One full adder can only add up to 1, 1 plus 1. To add large numbers, like 255, 255, we simply chain these full adders together. The carry-out of the first one becomes the carry-in of the second, and so on. This is the ripple carry adder. It is like a relay race where the electrons carry the overflow baton from one stage to the next. This repetition of simple units is what allows a computer to handle massive numbers. It doesn't need to be smarter to handle bigger numbers. It just needs more gates. Why do we use transistors instead of, say, mechanical gears like the old Babbage engines? Speed. Because these logic gates are implemented electrically, the signals propagate at nearly the speed of light. When you change an input, the result ripples through the gates almost instantly. This is why computers can perform billions of operations per second. While a mechanical switch might take 1/10 of a second to flip, a transistor can flip billions of times in that same window. This speed is what makes modern graphical interfaces and real-time processing possible. When we package 8 of these full adders together, we get an 8-bit adder. It can handle numbers up to 255, But what happens if you add 1 to 255? The carry ripples all the way to the end and then it has nowhere to go. This is overflow. In a computer, ignoring that final carry can be disastrous. Imagine a Boeing jet or a medical device where a number suddenly wraps back around to 0 because of an overflow error. This is why flags signals that tell the computer, hey, something went wrong, are just as important as the math itself. You might be thinking, great, it can add. But what about subtraction? What about multiplication? Here's the secret. Subtraction is just adding negative numbers. Multiplication is just repeated addition. By using clever tricks like 2's complement, a way of representing negative numbers in binary, we can use the exact same adder circuit to perform subtraction. Even incrementing a value, adding one, is just a simplified version of this logic. The 8-bit adder is a multi-tool, and its versatility is the foundation of the CPU. We have a machine that can add, but how does it know when to add? A computer doesn't just have one circuit. It has many. It has circuits for adding, circuits for comparing, and circuits for logic. If we send an instruction to the computer, how does it choose which tool to use? This introduces the concept of control logic. We need a way to tell the machine, ignore the subtraction circuit right now. I need the adder. This brings us to the binary decoder. A decoder takes a small binary input and uses it to activate exactly one output. Think of it like a librarian. You give the librarian a call number, the binary input, and they go to the exact shelf, the output, where that book is kept. If you have a 3-bit input, you can select from 8 different outputs. This allows a very small instruction to control a very large number of potential operations. When a computer reads an instruction, it sees a string of bits. Usually, the first few bits are the opcode, operation code. These bits are fed into the decoder. If the opcode is 010, the decoder might turn on the wire that activates the adder. If the opcode is 011, it might activate the subtractor. The opcode is the verb of the sentence, telling the computer what action to take on the nouns, the data. Now imagine a component where all the arithmetic circuits are running at the same time. The adder is adding, the XOR is XORing, the subtractor is subtracting. But we only want one answer. By using gated outputs, we connect the decoder to the exit of each circuit. Only the circuit that was selected by the opcode is allowed to send its result to the final output. The others are essentially muted. This internal selection mechanism is the heart of the processor's decision-making ability. We have finally reached the summit. That mysterious component that takes in numbers, takes in an opcode, and spits out a result with some status flags? That is the Arithmetic Logic Unit, or the ALU. The ALU is the engine room of the CPU. It is the part of the computer that actually computes. Every time you move a mouse, every time a frame of a game is rendered, billions of ALUs are firing, selecting operations via decoders and performing math via chained logic gates. It is the ultimate expression of how simple switches, layered through abstraction, become intelligence. Our journey today has shown us that there is no magic in a computer. There is only abstraction. Transistors make gates. Gates make adders. Adders make Alice. Alice makes CPUs. We've solved the problem of how a computer thinks, but we've left one glaring hole: memory. A computer that can calculate but can't remember the result is like a genius with no short-term memory. But that is a story for another day. For now, take a moment to look at the device in your hand. Beneath that screen, billions of switches just flipped to show you these words. They didn't do it because they wanted to. They did it because the geometry of their wiring made it inevitable. If we can learn anything from the transistor, it's that complexity is just layers of simplicity. When you are faced with a massive, overwhelming problem in your daily life, whether it's a career change, a difficult project, or learning a new skill, don't look at the whole CPU. Look for the switch. What is the smallest, simplest action you can take? Once you master that, how can you combine it with another simple action? We build our lives the same way we build our computers, one logical step at a time. If you get an overflow, if you feel overwhelmed, don't ignore the flag. Take a step back, recalibrate, and remember that even the most complex machine in the world started with a single on-off choice. What do you think? If you could design a logic gate for your own life, what would be the input A and input B that lead to your success output? Does the idea that computers are just glorified switches make them more or less amazing to you? Let's start a conversation in the comments below. Thank you so much for joining me on this deep dive today. Wishing you all the very best of health and happiness. And if you found this journey as fascinating as I did, please consider hitting that subscribe button and ringing the bell so you don't miss our next adventure into the heart of technology.